All right. Hey, everyone. We are at Better Call Saul with Saul Klein. Hey, Saul.
Hey, Jennifer, how's it going?
Good. How are you?
No complaints here.
Good. And Rachael Real. Hello, Rachel.
Morning. Morning, guys. How are you?
Good.
Good, Rachel.
So today we were going to talk about taxes, but taxes are kind of boring. They're important and we'll bring them back up. But instead, we decided to talk about technology and kind of the future of it. So, Saul, fill us in on the article you saw today.
Well, this was the other day, and this has been in the making for some time. So this is a real interesting happening in the residential real estate industry. And so we would go back to a couple months ago when Zillow purchased Showing Time. And so this was a very popular showing software. Showing software, really great collector.
Sorry, you froze for a second. Okay,
Ah,
what'd you say?
so it's a data collector, and so knowing who's looking at that's all valuable data,
Yeah,
and the capability to have that type of technology, that's valuable. And so Zillow purchased,
that was a great move
right?
on their end.
Yeah, great move.
After
And but
Dotloop,
then,
you
well,
have
people started freaking out, right? Then everybody starts freaking out. Oh my gosh, Zillow's going to do this, Zillow's going to do that, and there really wasn't any alternative. So there was what they call white space. There's an opportunity for
everything.
somebody to come in and create some competition for this very good showing software that had good market penetration.
Mhm.
And there was a competitor to Showing Time called Agent Inbox, and they were a good company. And I happened to be on that early board of advisors, but they ran out of revenue and they had to fold up. But they were in a number of markets. MLSs liked them. They had a good reputation, good functionality, and so when Zillow purchased Showing Time, then you had a lot of talk about a couple of
What are we gonna
large
do?
groups of MLSs were
Yeah.
looking for opportunities, and Tyler Gordon, the CEO, who lives in Lisbon, Spain. He's a traveling kind of guy, and but a great programmer, smart guy, young guy, and
Sounds like my
Tyler,
type, Saul.
huh?
Sounds like my type. You should.
Oh, you'd love him. So Tyler gets in contact with people. He throws this thing back out there that he had bundled up this capability, and five very forward-thinking MLSs. And I think this is just great news in the marketplace. Decided they were going to buy it, got themselves a terrific deal, and now Agent Inbox is owned by five big MLSs.
Oh,
Uh,
they no, they own the
they
software.
own it.
That's
They
how it
bought it.
works. Okay.
They bought it, right? So it was an early stage, and it had gone through several stages of funding, and it ran out of money. Great, but great software. And so the plan that they have is to bring it back, to integrate it with these five MLSs, five good size MLSs. And I'll
All
read
right.
the
Which
list of the
ones?
MLSs.
Yeah.
And I know the CEOs, great people. And so pretty interesting. So UtahRealEstate.com. It's 18,500 real estate professionals, 94% of all the realtors in the state of Utah, the
Wow.
MLS. They're one of the members of this organization called MLS Aligned. And you should look that up, MLS Aligned. And they have ideas about data and data ownership. And it's interesting, years ago, when I put the first data contracts together, there was a deficiency. And so I created a program that I evangelized. I called it contract alignment.
Mm-hmm.
Because when I went out and got contracts from MLSs, the data restrictions, I didn't have any. And then when I would give that data to like Zillow and Trulia, I would try to place restrictions on it. It was hard for me to do it as the one in the middle because there was not alignment, because the MLSs didn't know enough to put the data restrictions. So we created a program called contract alignment. Well, MLS aligned, that's the whole idea, to make sure that there's understanding that the entities work together around and with the data. So if you think about what they're doing here, they're buying this application, they're going to put it to work in their marketplace, creates competition to Zillow.
Right.
And so it's Utah Real Estate. RMLS, which is a regional multiple listing service in the Northwest, 15,000 realtors, good size MLS.
And that's like you said that that's Oregon and
That's Oregon, southern Washington.
Mhm.
And then Metro MLS, which is 9,000 members in Wisconsin. So you get a good cross section of the country. Huh?
Yeah.
And MLS listings, which is in Santa Clara, Santa Cruz, Silicon Valley kind of area. And it's 16,000 real estate professionals. So you've got this organization that has congruent ideas about data and data ownership in the industry, that has then brought in an application where it appeared like people were trying to fill a gap.
Right.
And I think it's a great move.
Yeah.
And I think they ought to take it nationwide. I think they ought to open it up to other MLS, say, come join this, and then look at all the things we'll be able to do with this data. And
Well, that was my next question is what do you think the likelihood is of this MLS aligned group taking this to, multiple MLSs across the country? I mean, they own it. They've just got to expand that. I'm thinking that's a huge financial move for them and a great move for the business in general.
I got to think that that's logical for them to do. It'll benefit their members. It'll benefit the industry.
Right.
It's just just a great move.
It's another
right
for them too.
So
absolutely.
MLS aligned. That's the name of the entity.
Okay.
MLS aligned, and I would just take a look at it, because if they're successful in doing what I think they are probably going to do, they'll be coming to your market.
Yeah.
What is their restriction on, okay, so let's say that they are successful and they get into other markets and other MLSs buy it. So now they own the data, right? The MLS aligned group owns the data.
Right.
What is their restriction, like, in order to?
So it's kind of interesting. So one of the first things I think you want to do is go read about MLS aligned and read what they believe about data and data ownership and how it can be treated. And I think you'll find that it kind of fits with some of the thoughts that you have about it. And you'll say, that's exactly what I want, an entity that if they're going to take control of the data, they lay out the premises around it.
Well,
absolutely. You want something completely transparent.
Yeah, but that's all fine and good until they change the terms.
Well, yeah, but how do you change the terms it depends on the structure of it.
Right. If they've got a board that represents the membership, then that's huge.
Right.
Yeah. So can it change? It can, but at least now it's in the hands of the people who are creating the data that's going into this.
Right. Exactly.
Right. And not somebody on the outside.
Yeah. Right. So like, I would think though, if I was like, say, like I ran the Cincinnati MLS or whatever, instead of like buying it as like a vendor relationship, I would probably want, depending on how I felt about data, how I thought the members felt about it, which then I would want to like be a decision maker in what happens with the data.
Participate at your association, be on the committees. Yeah. But here's what I think is going to
come on, Jen, you can do it.
I can't do it.
Right. I mean,
yes,
really, you can make a difference.
Absolutely.
You can participate. Your voice can be heard. I'm living proof that happens. Right. And now what we're looking at is what's going to happen as this evolves over time, use of the data, and it's an interesting conversation, right? It's an interesting argument, but I think people are more ready today to kind of handle this conversation than they've ever been before. And so I think it'll be interesting and healthy. We say under all is the data, and everything is built upon the data. And so it's important to look at as it comes into the system. I happen to believe. Now take a look at this. Take a look at real estate, information around real estate, loans that are placed around real estate, packages of loans that are sold in the secondary market. Look at this whole at the real property asset and everything around it.
Right.
And what's going to be done with that. So I think we're approaching a whole new age of economics around MLS. that there's enough what I call exhaust data. And that's not personally identifiable information, but
Okay.
just transactional flow information that will make things more efficient, that
Absolutely.
has a value.
Right. It
And
doesn't
the
need to
value
be
in that,
person specific data. It's just the data and the activity and the
it
showing
won't,
and
and the
all of
use
that.
of, right, and the use of it won't hurt anybody selling real estate. It'll make everything more efficient.
Absolutely.
And it's worth enough to pay for all of the cost of MLS. And
Right.
so there should be a whole new economic of MLS based upon the value that's created from and around the data of MLS by the people who are the worker bees, who are contributing and that's where it's headed.
But who would they
Right.
sell it to?
Well, it'll work its way up to and into the secondary money markets. And if you want my own opinion, it'll end up like New York Stock Exchange level commodities markets, futures markets. So I think we might have talked about this before, that there's no futures market in real estate. 40% of all the assets in the country are real estate, and there's no futures market, and that's because there's no spot market. And this kind of information could be integral to creating more pieces of a spot market that then create a futures market that brings more capital, and it creates a whole new economic structure around what we today call MLS.
I also think that there's like some people that are nervous around if we create, like if we have all this information and we make it like, we make everything like easier, all this stuff, that then as real estate agents, we won't have a job. But like, that's not true at all. Our job will actually be like different. It'll
be different.
Similar, but different. Like people will still need, like pricing a house is not fully automated. Like even if a computer has all the information, it's still impossible for a computer to price a house, because buying a house is an emotional experience.
Well, and you need a human component. You need the scratch and sniff. You need to be able to
Scratch and
see and
Yeah, but
smell
that's
and touch
technology.
it.
We talked about
Maybe you
that.
do. I mean, maybe that's all right. I mean, so, but the thing is, everybody has to play.
Yeah.
Right.
And move along that line to figure out exactly where their niche might be, or what it ends up, or where it ends up. And so I always say the job of somebody who sells real estate, it's to take the friction out of the transaction.
Mm-hmm.
And that we always talk about technology today. Technology is going to take the friction out of the transaction, but really, to me, that's the description of a real estate professional.
Yeah.
That's the person that takes the friction out of the transaction. So you find those points of friction wherever they might be.
Wherever they are. Yeah.
And then that's what you serve. And then there'll be a place for people who serve, right? And those different, and I mean, will compensation and employment and all those things, they've always in a state of flux and change, and with everybody, not only in the real estate industry, right? So
what do you think about, like, if we were going to talk about other technologies, what other things I always wanted to have like holograms in the houses that could like say stuff that we can't say, that it's like a message from the sellers or something like that about why they love the house. What do you think about that? That'd be cool, right?
Yeah, so I'm looking at this technology, and it's there, and it's gonna happen. And people at first they kind of shy away from the idea, but it's verified self showings.
Yes.
Right, verified self showings. So now you don't need a person to go. But they have to verify who they are, and it's probably safer than doing it the other way. And
because most agents don't even have like a buyer agreement or buyer consultation before they start up and take
and there's property management companies, at least in our market, that are using it's a spin-off of, they use Central Lock technology, but it's called Rently. So they use this platform where that lockbox then takes credit card information. You have to insert a credit card to put a deposit down in case you do something while you're in the house. I don't see that happening with traditional real estate when you're talking about occupied homes. I think that would be a train wreck. But for something that's vacant, property managers don't want to have to bounce all over the place.
But Rachel, never say never. We're talking about generations, right? We're talking about people that think completely different. Now, I know that when I talk to people, they think completely different than the way I think about things.
Right.
And so there's a whole generation totally accepting of things that were totally unacceptable to
That
me.
seems completely crazy to me. I
Plus,
still
like-
think that if I just put a box on my front door and somebody could throw their credit card in there and just come in here and hang out and
Well, I
eat
don't think
Cheetos
it'd
on
be
my
like- I don't
couch and
think
watch a football game.
I don't think it would be
know.
like that. I think it'd be more like Jennifer says, where there's, there are cameras, there's
Oh, yeah.
security, there are,
Yes.
no, it's not going to be something that simple, but
Right.
without having a human being there,
I
yeah,
think
I think
Right,
that's
right.
in the mix.
the future. I mean, at
Right.
least some aspect of it, because also too, with that, you can change the lockbox code. So right
Right.
now, if you have like just a regular lockbox, not like the one that the Century Lock or whatever, like people just know the code, right? And so
No, not necessarily. I mean, you've got to have as a licensed realtor for Central Lock anyway, you've got to have the app to be able to get in. If as an owner of a lockbox, I can. Well, right. I've seen combos used on rare occasion here, mostly for empty properties or vacant apartments, vacant condos, and things like that. But if you have a lock of that same Central Lock system, you can issue a 1-day code for someone who doesn't have that software, and that code rolls. So it's a one-time use only. You need to get back into it. You've got to issue a new one
Yeah, and I can see
and
that
track where those belong to. Right.
where
Right.
like
That's entirely possible.
guys- And honestly, like if I was a seller and I knew there was like some kind of software that was verifying the person, that was like collecting a credit card, was collecting an ID, gave them a one-time lock, I would trust that more than,
Sometimes you could trust that more than a realtor. Let's just be
yeah,
honest.
I mean, a lot of times you can, because a
Yeah.
lot of realtors, they don't even know who these people are. I mean, how many
Right.
realtors do you know where it's like the client never showed? What do you mean the client never showed? Do you not know them? Like, who are these people?
Right.
So the way these things appear is a choice. It just becomes a choice. If
Right,
someone wants that option, they have it, and if they don't
They
want
have
it,
it.
then
They don't.
They don't have to have it.
they don't
Absolutely.
have to have it.
Well,
Exactly.
and going back to the data sharing too, I was listening to a podcast episode that's based in Chicago yesterday, and they were talking about Central Lock's version of this similar software that they're kind of trying to roll out at the same time. And they were talking about sharing that data. And the host asked, well, the problem obviously with showing time is they were bought by Zillow. Zillow's then got the data and it's all over the place. What are you planning to do with the data that you have from here? And he said the only place, and this is a third party vendor, not owned by an MLS. And his response was, the only person that's getting this information is Lawrence Yoon, the chief economist of NAR. So
Right.
that we as members then are able to get that data and use it to our advantage, like you were talking about earlier.
Now think about this. If you were a local MLS and
Yeah.
you started to look at what is data, right?
Mhm.
When we start talking, what is it?
Mhm.
What fields? What types of things are we talking about?
Mhm.
What types of things are harmless? What types of things are beneficial? What types of things that we've never thought about before? So like
Right.
something as simple as, because we know this if we own the showing software, how many homes get shown a day? Period. Just
Right.
that fact.
Yeah.
Is
Right.
that valuable to somebody, particularly if
Absolutely.
you had it over 30 days, over 365 days, or just
Then we
that
would
one
really know the
thing?
best time to list, maybe.
Oh, 100%. I mean, think about what you could do with the data that shows month over month, how many more showings you're getting this month over last month. That's about as current as you can get.
And that will become more valuable as more data gets accumulated, right? Over a
Right.
greater period of time. As
Right.
AI, as artificial intelligence gets applied to it, as right. So the data and the storage of data and the buildup has a value.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
And
Well, and I use that data that's compiled from our MLS through
so
showing
who
time.
owns it?
Right. Well, I mean, the
And so
showing time is still owning that
today,
data.
so then there's data labor. And so all data can be marked, right, under new technologies and blockchain and those types of things. And so now if I add to the data, if I add labor to the data, is it possible for me to own a piece of that? And if that is ever monetized in any way, can it be tracked back to me so I can receive some type of payment for the data labor that I added? The answer is yes.
Mhm.
And that's where things are going. And so it's important for people in real estate, for us to kind of keep looking at these things. And like when we hear the words blockchain, we hear, non-fungible tokens, it's not important that we understand everything about it, but we should be paying attention because it's going to work its way into
Yeah.
right into the real estate industry. And so
I
if you
think
just
too,
know a
like
little
when
bit
you
about,
think about like who owns the data, it's also what is like, it's not only who owns it, but what is their ability to change what they're able to do with it.
Even what is it?
And what is it? Yeah, what is
Right?
it?
So an aggregation of bunches of data become, matter of fact, it used to be the value of the MLS. We used to talk about copyright, the who owned the MLS. What the MLS owned was the aggregation of the data. So now we think of data in a lot of different ways, and it's used in a lot of different ways. And
Soon we'll all have like a social score and a number. Where all we are is data.
yeah, that too, for sure. That's where it's headed. So how do you utilize it? See, I'll go, how do you utilize this knowledge in your real estate business?
Mm-hmm.
How can you use this to your advantage? What are the things that are driving all of this? And is it important for you to know, or is it not important for you?
Well, I think the showing stuff is critical, and a lot of reports you can pull from showing time. So it's like, okay, how many showings have been in the last 30 days in this neighborhood or in this market or whatever.
And that's very helpful when you're going on a listing appointment to be able to say, hey, in the last 30 days, this is as short as 29 days old here. This is what's going on right now.
Right. Exactly.
And that's great information to be able to use.
It is. Or like the average, you know, because it'll have like when it goes pending too, right? So it's like the average showing on a house in this market is 10 showings, then it goes pending, and then the showings drop to like 1 or 2 or whatever.
Exactly. And that's helpful for talking to a seller when it comes time to adjust a price. You know, here's what all the data shows. All of this data shows that we should have no more than about 10 showings, and then you should be under contract. If we're at 15, we're not in the right price range here. So it's just another tool, because when it comes from somebody other than us, it makes a lot bigger impact.
Right.
Yeah. So you look today and you'll see that decision making is being driven more and more by data.
Absolutely.
And so I saw this great phrase. It was from intuition to data.
Yeah.
You know, intuition to data, and that's what's happening, and it's happening
You
everywhere.
can analyze data in a lot of different ways. I mean, as good salespeople, we can we can spin stuff. Like looking at the same data, and Rachel says something, and I say something else, like the opposite.
Right.
So then what? Who's right?
Well, the more data then that you have, and the more capability that you have to then display that data in different scenarios, right?
I don't know. We also talked about, Rachel and I've talked about before, like she said that the scratch and sniff test, like what if in the MLS, the listings, you could like smell the listing? Like somehow there's like a button like on the computer, or like
smell-o-vision.
Smell-o-vision.
Yeah.
Just whether or not you have an animal might be helpful on a property disclosure, or not even a disclosure, but just somewhere in the MLS. Do pets live here? Yeah, I know when it says, when the showings notes say, don't let the cats out, I know I'm going to need to dope up on some Benadryl before I get in there. And it's probably not going to be pretty.
So the form that we use today to access technology is this.
Right.
Yeah.
But this is not the ultimate form that we'll use to access technology.
No.
And tactile and senses and things that we can't do with the current form is only temporary.
But you know, when we're in, when we have a virtual reality world, I'm going to nominate myself for czar of real estate. You guys can be on, you want to be on the board if I get elected.
Yes.
I feel like in a virtual world, we can have a czar, right?
You might be able to.
I want to sell the first virtual house.
Do you remember Second Life?
I remember, yeah.
Right? Like, I don't remember the year. I wrote an article on it, Second Life, but Coldwell Banker actually had an office in Second Life.
They did?
And Second Life was like this early virtual world, had its own money. And so and it was like really kind of bizarre to me, because the people would have these, what do they call not emojis, but they were avatars.
Yeah.
And you could have your avatar with spiked hair, but to have spiked hair, you had to like buy a hairdo, or you could have earrings, but you had to buy it. Well, to buy it, the medium of exchange were Lindens. Linden was, I guess, the name of the developer of the program. So you could buy it's like the first cryptocurrency. You could exchange, credit. You use your credit card. You could buy so many Lindens based on the exchange rate of the Linden. And then when you were in Second Life, you could buy and sell stuff in Second Life. And it was all bizarre to me to just kind of watch. But there are people They did. They loved it. This was, and that was the kind of the beginning.
Yeah.
And God, EXP kind of
What happens
grew right into that kind of thing. It's like virtual
Yeah.
through this though, right? And
Yeah.
this is primitive still.
But now it'll be even more virtual. Like imagine that, okay, we have a listing and buyers want to see it. And instead of going there, because everybody lives like they don't live anywhere anymore or whatever. So they put on like their virtual reality, whatever, or it's like a
Don't need to put it on, but yeah.
planted in our head or whatever, right? And they can walk through the house and they can watch a football game and they really feel what it's like to like live there.
Yeah.
Remember that show that was on a couple of years ago? I don't remember what it was called, where you were looking at, they'd take couples through houses, almost like House Hunters, and then they would sleep in it for a weekend and then decide if they wanted to buy it.
That's awesome.
It seemed so ridiculous that you just open your house and let someone sleep in it for a couple of days. But yeah, it's kind of like that.
If you saw the data and said, okay, how many deals go down before it closes? It's like, and then if you did sleep in it for a weekend, like how many of those deals went down? It may make more sense. You know what I mean?
Depends on the type of property, right?
Right. Well, I almost wonder if like here, if you let anybody in a house after an inspection, the chances of it tanking after that are 50 at
But
least.
what if you're back to when it's a 90 to 120 day, 180 days to sell a house?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, but with
people they'll try different things.
Yeah. But with blockchain and stuff, like it's going to be like the days of selling a house, taking it like 30 to 60 days of selling it, it's going to be over because it won't take that long to get a loan because the data will be there and you're either approved or you're not approved.
Yeah. People say that this will never happen like this, but I think otherwise. You'll be able to buy and sell a house just like you buy and sell stock.
Absolutely.
That will be that quick if you want to do it. The biggest obstacle will be regulation.
Yeah.
Cooling off periods, backing out period, right? That'll be the hindrance.
That's never gonna go away either.
Right.
Well, that's not true. I mean, look at how many people now in this market are waiving inspections, waiving appraisals, bidding, you know what I mean? Like there's
so now what happens is liquidity
Rachel
and certainty in the marketplace. Then you have more transactions if you have more liquidity and more certainty. And so maybe the 5.2 million transactions doubles.
Well, plus people are going to they'll only own the house from March to May.
Well, that's Picasso's deal, right? Where you could buy a second home and you can own it for 6 months and they take care of everything. And so instead of having having to own two houses, I own a half a house in one part of the country and a half a house in the other part of the country. And that's where I live. And that's my second home. And now second homes are made available to more people. And that's Picasso. That's Spencer Raskoff. And
I've never heard of that. It's
an interesting concept, right? Austin, Allison, I think, the whole thing about being able to buy part of a second home. And that goes to this whole other concept of, remember we talked about dynamic yield maximization of an otherwise static asset.
Yes.
Getting more use out of the real estate.
Right.
And the technologies that make the transfers and the lockdowns and everything easier.
Right.
Allow you to do more things with it, as evidenced by Airbnb.
Right.
Where you
I think it's going to be really interesting. And then what if we, instead of being licensed in a state, we were just like licensed in the world to sell real estate? So like you could sell it anywhere.
Well, the only issue with that is the state's licenses are monopolies.
Yeah.
And when a state has the right to give you a license, they have the right to give you a monopoly. And so the way it's set up is in the United States, it's all the jurisdictions are state and territorial, and they probably would never give that up. So to practice in those states, now you say you could get out of their reach because you could be virtual.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
And I don't know that we'd want national real estate.
I'm thinking international. I don't know. I mean, that would be
Well,
some,
now that's a tough one because people got different ideas about property rights,
right.
right? In some parts of the world, owning your own real estate doesn't make any sense at all in their way of thinking.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. So maybe nationals, well, even different parts of the country our country have different.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I don't know. I guess we'll see. Technology is interesting. It's definitely happening, right? So it's just a matter of like,
It'll keep changing,
for sure.
right?
Absolutely.
The transaction will keep changing. It'll keep getting more streamlined. It'll keep getting easier. It'll keep getting less expensive, right? The big, think about title insurance, where that's going to go. Because with blockchain,
We'll need it.
right? Well, you'll still need the insurance because remember, it's an insurance component, but now it's much
Right.
easier, I think, much more secure to insure a blockchain transaction than
Right.
it is to insure the county recorder's record. And if there's a flaw in title,
You
it'll
think?
cover it,
That was
right?
like
That's the
Android.
insurance. That's the title insurance.
Yeah.
So, but
Right.
it's all in like blockchain. It's all, then you could insure that for like probably pennies
Pennies.
to
Right.
what you do now.
Well,
I
and based on all of that too, I mean, if you're talking about making it more streamlined, making it less expensive, making less, having less obstacles, how likely do you think it's going to be that realtors become less a part of the transaction?
I don't think they will, because I think what will happen is that we'll, as real estate agents, we're going to need to know more. We're going to,
We are, right.
Yeah.
Although I think that we're going to have to know more, but the general public is going to feel that they have access to all that same information and they can do it themselves.
Yeah,
Because I think I'm already seeing that too.
yeah, but they have access now, and we are still relevant, and people still use
So
realtors.
I think today, look at all the things that are going on that we've talked about, like a company that allows you to buy half a house.
Right.
If I heard about that, who would I want to call and ask? My real estate professional.
Right.
My
Right.
real estate professional should know about that.
Yeah.
We talked
Absolutely.
about before the unbundling of the bundle of rights, where there are companies today that allow you to sell off pieces of the bundle of rights. If I heard about it, who would I want to ask about it?
Right.
Right.
My real estate professional. So a real estate professional today needs to learn about the applications of the technologies around real estate, because knowing those things gives the consumer a reason to come to you.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
It'll be interesting. I think that the role of a real estate agent will definitely change.
Yes.
But I think that could be, I think that will increase the barrier to entry.
I would
and
hope so.
think about people who want to invest.
Yeah.
Who are they going to go to?
Yeah. Realtor.
But only if you know about it and you tell people that you know about it. And so I think there's still, as long as you can own real estate, I think there's opportunity. Now there's great pushback. We talked about this, that there's great potential changes to the philosophy around ownership of real estate in our country. And the way that we've known and done this in the past is going to be challenged dramatically from a number of different fronts, good reasons and bad reasons.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have to be equipped to participate in those conversations.
Yeah.
They're coming.
Yep.
It's interesting. It's always fun. Well, let's, I think that was a good ending point. Learn about technology, get involved, right? That's what we want people to take.
Get involved.
Yes.
Yeah.
Take the time. The agents should be taking the time, especially, I mean, this market's a little more challenging because it is so busy and crazy, but the downtimes and, off seasons is when we should, as agents, be taking the time to learn about these things so that we can serve our clients better.
Yeah.
And another piece is there's not enough housing.
Right.
Right.
Absolutely.
And then that piece where we haven't produced enough housing since 2011.
Yeah.
And we're so far behind in
Right.
having enough housing
Crazy.
that the housing becomes more valuable and institutions want to buy it because it becomes a good investment.
Right.
And they all see that. And so this whole nature of the American dream
Yeah.
is being challenged.
Yeah.
Sure is.
It definitely is. Well, Rachel, if people want to send a referral to you in Chicago, what is the best way to get a hold of you?
The best way to reach me is by cell phone at 630-542-8688 or RachaelReal@gmail.com.
Awesome. And Saul, if people have questions for you, what is the best way to get a hold of you?
Saul at bettercallsaul.realtor. Saul at
Nice.
bettercallsaul.realtor. And you can read, we're relaunching the dataadvocate.com. So as we talk about all these different things that are taking place, we're writing about them and you
Nice.
can see them there.
That's perfect.
Excellent.
All right. Thank guys.
Thank you.